Hello and welcome to Introspection with Jeff. I'm all fired up. I had uploaded a video I made this morning, but this is really on my mind. I've got a bunch of ideas on my mind and I want to get them out quickly so I can have room for new ideas. I thought this morning, well, actually I've been thinking for a while about what television shows I enjoyed and what inspired them, and perhaps in this video, I'll delve into topics that I would like to get into if I were a filmmaker. The feeling that I'm going to be able to fulfill my dreams of being a filmmaker, public storyteller, are dwindling. But maybe this will help. And driving home from the supermarket, there was one TV show theme song that just popped into my mind, and this is a show that I didn't really watch when it aired in high school, but it always came on Fox after Married with Children, and this is during the 6th season when I was recording every episode of Married with Children, and being as I like the theme song, I usually just typically kept it running, kept the VCR running. Yes, VCRs, those ancient things that came before streaming services, where you could actually record stuff yourself. The show was called Good Grief, and I never really, I've seen one episode, perhaps all the way through. It just didn't appeal to me. It starred Howie Mandel, who I like. He's a funny guy. But the opening lyrics really spoke. I know I've seen it on YouTube. I don't want to for two reasons. I don't want to try and insert the theme into this video because, number one, I'm still trying to understand how to work the editing software I have, and it's really cumbersome. I have a slow computer and so forth, blah, 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 and all that, so that I may be copy struck. So I don't want to risk that. I'll look it up. It's probably still on there. Good Grief. It's a sitcom, takes place in a funeral parlor. I remember the opening. Let me describe what it opens up with. Shows a cemetery outdoors, and it shows somebody, Howie Mandel, golfing. Bright sunny day. In fact, the lyrics are, if I remember, see the sky so blue, smell the grass so nice and green. Live it up, give it your best shot. And then just at this moment, he makes a golf swing. He looks up and he smiles. He sees, I think his father-in-law, but I didn't watch the show, but I think it's his father-in-law walking towards him and arguing with him. And it's like he's not even paying attention to what the older man is saying. He looks over his shoulder and sees this beautiful woman who's his wife in the show. He's dressed in black. The other guy's dressed in black. She's dressed in like this white, almost wedding dress. It's a bright sunny day. He waves over and walks and like bumps the other guy on the shoulder as he walks by and walks towards her. See the sky so blue, smell the grass so nice and green. Live it up, da da da, it's all going by. Well, give it your best shot. Make sure to go for every dream. And then the two unite and they start twirling in a dance. Nice. Go for every dream. All going by. I can't rest of the lyrics. not dancing because you gotta, something like you gotta dance, but you can't dance it da da da. But you can't dance if you don't move your feet. No, 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 no. All on board, and they start twirling in the cemetery. All on board. Let's enjoy the coaster ride. Live it up, da da da. It's all going by. There'll be some ups and downs till it comes round to goodbyes. Live it up. And then it shows, at the very end, it cuts to one of the other characters leaning, just casually sitting with his legs out, sitting against a tombstone. And he says, "You've got to celebrate." And he's smiling at the camera. The final lyric is, "Celebrate life." And that's one of the best expressions of my attitude towards life. The attitude I had in high school, and I think the attitude I still have. I've tried to maintain anyway. So that got me thinking about delving into moments in film history and TV, well, primarily TV history, because at that time I was more interested in becoming a television producer and creator, something like Rod Serling or Gene Roddenberry, than I had been in film, although I really enjoyed film. And finding moments. But something else attracted my attention. Mentioning TV series that were very influential and explaining why they were influential. One of the earliest that made a big impact on me, again, this is television. If it were film and television, of course, I would include Star Wars, specifically Return of the Jedi. But Transformers I was introduced to in 1984, somewhere in 1984, but I didn't have cable, so I couldn't enjoy watching the show. So I had this notebook, and I've mentioned this before, I'm sure. I had this notebook. I would copy down the paragraphs on the text specs of the back of each Transformers toy box. For example, the Autobot leader, Optimus Prime, came in a box. The toy came in a box. He was transformed into truck mode, and it had nice, colorful artwork on the front. And then you flip it over on the back. There was a nice battle scene. Below that, there was a rectangular text spec, and some of it was divided in half, roughly. Some of it had strength, endurance, rank, courage, firepower, skill. I think speed. I think that's about all of them. And there was a graph, and it indicated the how much strength the character had, how much endurance the character had, the rank, and so forth. And now, on roughly the other half of it showed the artwork of the character in a battle pose, and then that you saw on the other side of the box, the front part of the box, and then it had a paragraph. At the top, it had the name of the character. It had the function, which would be like military strategist, medic, commander, historian, something like that, technician, plumber, who knows, stuff like that. Not plumbers. And then below that, it had a motto that in quotes, that the character, I guess, lived by. And then beneath that, there was a paragraph. And the paragraph would always start off describing the character's personalities. It didn't describe the weaponry. I noticed that even as a child, I picked up. Didn't mention it. It didn't begin with the character's abilities. It didn't mention anything about the alternate mode, like car mode or truck mode. It always began with the personality, as if that's the most prominent thing you should start off with knowing about this character. And some of them were really fascinating. They were, I think all of them were developed by one guy, Bob Budiansky. He would write every paragraph for every character in at least generation 1, and then later on they had a second generation of Transformers characters, and then Beast Wars and so forth. But He wrote every character, and especially in that first year, that first and second year, they were some of the they were, and that delves into the series partly, the Transformers animated series partly, as you know, amongst this list of TV shows that were influential. There was some fascinating science fiction potentials here. I hadn't seen the show, so all I had for reference material were these paragraphs, and one character could generate holograms. One character could draw energy from a black hole and fuel himself indefinitely. Another character could feel the pain of his trailer. Optimus Prime had three components: the trailer, the robot, and the scout car, and each one could feel the other's pain. And their personalities were very diverse. Some Autobots on the good team had vengeful feelings towards Decepticons. Some were haunted by the war itself. Some ached to go back to Cybertron. Some were questioning why the war exists. And for example, the motto for Optimus Prime is "Freedom is the right of all sentient beings." I mean, how many toys aimed at roughly like 7 years old and up would have a profound quote like that? His counterpart, his Decepticon counterpart, Megatron, had peace through tyranny. And there's so much you could read into that. And that delves into, or that segues into, what I wanted to get into with the Transformers series. And that my take into it. I felt inspired to learn, what does this peace through tyranny, where does that come from? What does it mean? What's tyranny? What is Megatron getting at by saying that? What are Optimus Prime's values if he says that freedom is the right of all sentient beings? Stuff like that. And there was an interesting rivalry. You had several Decepticons who wanted to usurp Megatron as leader. You had Starscream, who believed since he could take to the air, he was better than Megatron, and he deserved his chance at being leader. You had Shockwave, who transformed into a large laser rifle, and his thing was logic. And in fact, I read that Bob Budiansky had in mind the character of Mr. Spock from Star Trek. If you took a mirror universe version, a dark, evil version of Mr. Spock, he imagined that would be Shockwave. And so he saw himself as being more the rational and logical, that he deserved to be leader rather than Megatron. And there's a whole interesting dynamic I could see even as a child. I was fascinated by. Like, what if you could make a movie about these different factions, and what style best commands, what style best leads, stuff like that. So I kept all these paragraphs. I copied all these paragraphs in a notebook, actually 2 notebooks, and I still have them. They're like, in some sense, my series Bible. I covered this in an earlier video. So anyway, so when I saw the TV show 1985, fall of 1985 and onwards, since they began to be aired like 5 times a day, I really became engrossed in it. And what impact did it have on me? First of all, it was a touch of the bizarre. These are giant robots that could transform into cars. So right there, as I said in a recent earlier video, I like things that bend reality, bend your expectations and sense of what reality is. And also, the first thing I always think of is these are like titans. These are like the Greek gods that are huge. They're like demigods. They're these giant, literally giants walking around with huge powers. So they're like superheroes and supervillains inherently because of their height, because of their large size. And again, also because of those intriguing science fiction elements. And even in high school, I remember thinking, this is remarkable. This has the potential to be a huge, I'd like a huge television series. I'd like to do a movie. And this was before, I think it was J.J. Abrams. I'm sorry. No, it wasn't J.J. It was before the live action. Sorry, I blanked the producer out of my mind, but it was before the live action Transformers movies. I wanted to do something more like that. There had only been 3 seasons of a cartoon up until that point, and there was one animated movie. But I saw the animated series, which was okay. It was entertaining for a while. I mean, the episodes would be entertaining for a while. They would hold you. But I would read the paragraphs and I thought, there's a whole lot more to delve into. I saw it as more of a live action. I mean, of course, CGI really hadn't been developed then, but some kind of visual special effect that would bring them to life, to explore the nature of war in new, fascinating science fiction style ways. You combine science fiction and war drama. I want to say something like, even though I hadn't seen it at the time, now I've seen a few episodes, something like if you combine MASH or Band of Brothers, something like that, with science fiction elements, and broad, expansive, mythical, on a large scale, themes, topics, subject matter. So I envision that in my head. So I have tech specs, mythological titans, touch of the bizarre. And then that was 1985, 86. I was in 5th grade. Well, actually, 85, 86. I would have been in 4th grade. 86, 87. I would have been in 5th grade. And in the end of 1986, maybe January 87, about that time, I had seen my first Star Trek movie. I can't say I had seen the first. I can't say that I had seen my first Star Trek. That was the first Star Trek movie I'd seen in the theater, because from what my mom told me, I saw Star Trek 3 before having seen Star Trek 2 on TV, according to what she said. It's a thing that happens at the end of 2 that they develop further in part 3. However, according to what she said, I guess I had seen part 3 before seeing part 2, so it didn't influence me as much. Who knows? But anyway, after seeing Star Trek 4 around December 86 or January 87, I quickly became interested in Star Trek. So simultaneously, there was a period I had Transformers and Star Trek melded together as common interests, as shared, sharing my interest. And then Transformers kind of died away as I entered 6th grade, and Star Trek took hold. I wanted to do a whole video about what is so important about Star Trek. I should touch on a little bit here. What impressed upon me about Star Trek? First of all, it takes place on a spaceship. It's one of a fleet of spaceships from Earth, and it's it's an allegory to the Navy. If you imagine the U.S. Navy as, if you imagine the U.S. as being Earth, you have the U.S. Navy as being like Starfleet. So you have an Enterprise starship being sent out on a 5-year mission to, as it says in the opening theme, explore strange new worlds, seek out and contact alien life, and of course the third, to boldly go where no man has gone before. And I see in that third phrase to be brave and to go beyond your limitations and strive for better, strive to develop, to mature, to grow. Just the pure element of growth, mentally, physically, spiritually, emotionally, just to grow. You can't sit still. You must change and evolve. So there's that aspect that spoke to me. And I guess people are afraid of getting into the show because there's so much in the universe to learn, and they're going to get lost. They're not going to understand this. It's going to be way over their heads. They're going to be talking about theory of relativity and physics and so forth, and it doesn't apply to real life. I had worked for a while at Hutchings in the children's outpatient unit, and I came back for a visit and talked with the nurse there who would, we knew each other when I was working there. I came back and we chatted for a bit. I remember actually when I was working there, the subject of Star Trek came up, and she said that I don't know if she said she didn't like it. She clearly expressed words along that effect, like along those lines. She couldn't understand it. On some level, it's very easy. It's basically the human condition. Star Trek is about human characters representing Earth, going out to encounter weird situations, something like Twilight Zone. I mean, in some sense, in many cases, the actors who were in Twilight Zone were also in Star Trek. I mean, they made appearances back and forth. Of course, at that time, an actor working in television tended to, if he was good, if it was established to some degree, he would make appearances in several different shows. But I noticed there's a remarkable number of actors who have appeared in both shows. Anyway, you have these likable human characters who are like the best, sort of in some sense, best friends that you could have. You have a Captain Kirk, who looks out for his crew. He takes an interest in and concern over the health and safety of his crew. He's close friends with Spock, and the friendship, you see the friendship, deep friendship between them over the course of the whole series, and then beyond into the movies and so forth. There are loads of novels and so forth that go into it even further. But there's a deep respect, friendship, curiosity, concern for well-being amongst the entire crew for each other. And there's also a sense of optimism that this takes place in the future. They never specified exactly what century it was set in. The closest they came was the 22nd century, because they referred to coming across some event that happened in our history, like in the 18th century or whatever, and they say, oh, that's 200 years ago. So about 3 episodes, something like that, consistently hinted that it was in the 22nd century. And then, of course, in the movie, released 10 years later, they say it takes place in the 23rd century, and whoops, It'd be interesting to figure out who decided it was the 23rd century. Anyway, I could get into that later. But so anyway, it's set in the future. And so in that future, Earth, humanity has learned to mature and respect each other. You have a Scotsman, you have Germans, you have a black female officer on the bridge. You have a Russian. This is during the Cold War. You had a Russian officer. You had an alien officer, and so forth. And periodically through the series, there'd be characters, guest characters with last names that would hint at their ethnicity. And there was a sense that humanity had come together and become a family, finally. And there's a sense of hope and optimism, and just as in each episode, there's a sense that humanity has learned how to deal with conflict more constructively and positively, and with a more humane philosophy, just as it has been in the backstory established, and hints like you see them different color, different ethnicities, and so forth. There's a hint that that's happened in the past. Just as that is, so in each episode you see Kirk or some other character figuring out a clever solution to the predicament they're in. And although there are fistfights and there are physical struggles, I mean, this is an action-adventure TV show, the solutions weren't always, I don't think they were ever really dealt with by a fist fight. There may have been a fist fight in the climax, but there's a sense overall in the series that there's a smart, clever solution being tried out. And that really spoke to me, that there always is a way. In fact, in one of the TV episodes, the Galileo 7, Spock says at one point there are always alternatives. And that's even brought up again in one of the movies, that Kirk remembers that his friend Spock always said, had said there are always alternatives. Meaning you don't give up, you keep trying. Number one, you don't give up, you keep trying. Number two, look for a peaceful, constructive solution to the problem. There's also a sense of suspense that got to me through the series. Each episode was very different. Because the ship was exploring space and going from planet to planet or encounter to encounter, it's not a typical crime drama or police drama where, okay, here's the bad guy, we have to go after the bad guy. 1 week, they could be on a planet that where they accidentally absorb a virus that makes them act drunk and reveal their inner inhibitions, lets down their inhibitions and so forth. And next week, they could be encountering a Klingon warship and in a neutral spot, and it becomes very political, dealing with the ethics of war and so forth. The next week could be something very fanciful. Next week, it could be them encountering aliens that play with their minds, and the episode will explore the dangers of illusion and temptation and so forth. So each week, each episode was very different. And in fact, one of the actors said that it was a real kick for him as an actor. The one who played the doctor, DeForest Kelley, said that it was a kick for him as an actor because each week he didn't know what to expect. One week he had makeup on to simulate him having aged, because in that episode some of the characters encountered something that made them age drastically. so forth. So I was always watching with my mom, usually on pins and needles, like excitedly, and following every moment, like sort of like somebody watching a film, a suspense thriller, and noticing every minute detail because it could come up later on in the story, or noticing a twist, a plot twist in the story. That's how I would watch the show. And it was also, I should say this, at this point, my mom photocopied this book called The Star Trek Compendium. I forget the author's, Alan Asherman. I forget the author's name, whose name is Alan Asherman. I borrowed the book from the library so many times that she photocopied it, and I had a nice blue notebook, a 3-ring binder, and hole punched with the Xerox pages, photocopied pages inside. So I would, again, that was like a Bible too, just like my Transformers 2 spiral notebooks of tech specs. This is like my Bible to learn about the show, the making of the show. And in fact, I didn't even write it down here, but really, I was amiss at mentioning this. This is my entree into behind the scenes world of television production. I learned about technical advisors. I learned the role of a television series producer. I learned about set design, so forth and so on. Special effects, the costs of a TV show, what goes into the budget, how is it produced, and so forth. Specifically from my point of view, script writing. I may have even learned the formatting of scripts from some Star Trek scripts I had read. Anyway, so that's another aspect that impacted me. That another aspect of Star Trek impacting upon me. I had to have here too a touch of the bizarre, which I kind of mentioned already. I like when reality is twisted. I like when expectations are thrown off. I just like I'm like Salvador Dali at heart. Like I like seeing a painting with a clock dripping over a branch or whatever. I like the paranormal. I like books about the unexplained, where you're walking down the street and then you see a craft with weird lights. You're venturing out to the woods and it's creepy and it's moody and it's dark and you hear crickets and you see a little creature run by, something that shouldn't be there, but yet it's right there and you have to deal with it. So I like that. Star Trek shows encounters with things that twist your imagination. Again, like Twilight Zone. But I don't want to say that that's the only connection I have with that Star Trek had with Twilight Zone, or that the actors were shared between the two series. There was also, as typical with some other TV shows at the time, they were very philosophic. In Twilight Zone, Rod Serling or whoever was writing it, or maybe Rod Serling somewhere in the background, was trying to communicate a philosophical message about what we're like as humans, how we innately react, like what are our common fears, what are our common desires. Let's take this ethical problem and delve into its ethical ramifications. Should we do this? Should we do that? And the same thing is in Star Trek. Okay, leaving the 23rd century for a moment. I should say also, about this time, my mom gave me a I guess, yeah, she paid for it. I don't remember how I got it, but I guess she paid for it. PXL 2000, which was a Fisher-Price camera that recorded about 10 minutes. It could record about 10 minutes of black and white video on a 30-minute side of a cassette, which was pretty good at the time. And I just watched a documentary called Spielberg. It was made, I guess, in 2017, according to the ending credits. It's aired on HBO and it's on demand right now for free. I subscribe to Amazon Prime. I don't know. No, that wouldn't have anything to do with it. No. It's I subscribe to Verizon Cable, so it should be free if you want to see it. It's very interesting. Anyway, he had a camera as a child. He got a camera, and I guess a lot of filmmakers, promising young filmmakers, get cameras when they're children. And my camera was really, I suppose, my pen and paper. But when I was watching that, when I was writing down the TV series that inspired me as a child, I wrote to the left of it, I wrote My Mom, PXL 2000. And I remembered her getting it for me. I guess she was encouraging me to become a filmmaker. She was encouraging me to use the camera. It's not like she encouraged me every day. I mean, she got it and she was happy when I was using it. But now thinking back, I mean, what Steven Spielberg did with his 8mm camera, whatever it was, I feel a lot of regret. I feel sadness and conundrum, because I guess would I have been somewhere, would I have developed myself more if I had a camera, or used the PXL 2000 more? If I had a real camera that was more sophisticated and capable. My mom didn't have much in terms of money, but it must have cost something at the time. And I remember talking to my friend, that friend that would drive me to synagogue, so forth. I remember him saying something like the PXL 2000 was a big deal, or it was not that it blew other cameras away, but I mean, he said something to the effect that it was a nice camera, and my mom really believed in me. But aside from that, I mostly wrote and wrote and wrote. I wrote stories. I do want to get into my writer's block and my feeling of failure, especially after having seen the documentary Spielberg. I really do want to get therapy in terms of that. I mean, through talking here. Okay. All right. After Star Trek, I wrote Married with Children. And these are principally in order. So Transformers was my earliest, the earliest show that had a big impact on me that I recall, really, Star Trek. Married with Children was a sitcom. I've sort of likened it to the Munsters in that it was a sitcom, sadly, hardly anybody knows about now. Okay, it was the anti-sitcom. In fact, before they came upon the decision to name it Married with Children, they named it something like Not the Cosbys. The Cosby Show was a big hit for NBC, and it had a wholesome family. Of course, I watched that. Of course, I kind of side with Family Ties. They're different shows in their own ways, but I think Family Ties is written better. Maybe at some point in the future, people will recognize that. Anyway, not to disparage Bill Cosby, he's a great comedian, but Family Ties has a lot to it. I guess because the Cosby Show seemed to have several different plot lines going on at the same time because it had so many more characters, and I like shows that are centrally focused. I don't like B plots. I don't like the ship plot and you have the A plot. I like just one storyline with different character with different threads running along parallel, exploring that same topic or that same plot. I like it aimed somewhere, like it's going somewhere, and there's a climax to it. I don't like where you have little climaxes popping up at the end. Anyway, Married with Children originally was not the Cosbys, and it was poking fun. It was a parody. It was a satire of the wholesome family values sitcom uh, formula at the time. Now, of course, there have been so many comedies like Married with Children afterwards that it gets lost in the midst of the forest. It has Al Bundy as the father, Peggy Bundy as the wife. The daughter is Kelly Bundy, and the son is Bud Bundy, and they have a dog. And then they have next door neighbors, the Rhodes, Steve and Marcy Rhodes. Typical family. However, they played up the stereotypes, and this is what I really like. Al Bundy worked and worked and worked at a job he didn't like, he didn't care for, but he kept working at it. He wondered where his money was going. His wife spent his money. She just went through money like it was growing on trees. She complained about their sex life. She embodied all the stereotypes of a housewife that didn't work, didn't want to work, had fun and games in life, and so forth. The daughter was a slut. She was beautiful blonde, airhead. The son was smart, and I always got the impression he was he didn't know why he was in that family. And on some level, it is sort of philosophical. If you look beyond it was really quirky, rapid-fire dialogue. I mean, sometimes I compare it to the dialogue and the way the husband and wife would spar. I would compare that to 1930s romantic comedies. I'm talking about Bringing Up Baby and My Man Godfrey. In some sense, I wanted to do a romantic comedy set before Married with Children began, before they had kids, and just had Al and Peggy in this screwball romantic comedy. It really fits. If you look beyond that rapid-fire dialogue and the comedy and the bizarre situations, you have some real philosophically interesting aspects. The father questions what happened to his life. He played by the rules, sort of, in somewhat. At least in the first 5 seasons, you get the impression that he played more by the rules. In later seasons, it was all twisted around. He wonders how he got into this life, and sometimes he questions how he got there. Peggy Bundy, philosophically, she's trying to get a better life. I could delve into it further, I guess. I guess part of me is this little voice inside me right now is saying they're not going to, you're not going to believe anything about what I'm saying. So I guess that's kind of blocking me. But anyway, so principally what impacted on me at the beginning about the show, aside from a friend enjoying it and getting me hooked on it, was the quick humor, and the humor was observational. That's another thing. The humor, it wasn't just quick slap, funny lines. The dialogue that they would say to each other was almost sometimes endearing. Like there was one, and memorable. I mean, I can even remember. I mean, aside from having watched the episode so many freaking times over and over and over, I can remember these lines. Uh, I remember Peggy Bundy excitedly coming through the door, and she says, "Al, did you miss me?" And Al says, "With every bullet so far." And it's again, that's like a 1930s romantic screwball comedy. It's like there's the delivery is kind of with an endearing tone, but yet it shows a degree of frustration too, and not only frustration, but like honesty and sincerity. They're honest with each other. I mean, of course, in episodes they work around each other, you know, do things behind each other's backs. But aside from that, I mean, when they talk with each other, they're they're honest with each other, and there's a sincerity in what they say. Um, Aside from the joke actually being funny, um, and it's observational. There, I remember there's another part where. All right, this really hits home to me now. I mean, at the time when watching the show, I would hear Al Bundy's jokes and self reflection, and he did self reflect in the show. The character, um, he would wonder, how did I get here? Like, what happened to me that I got stuck in this job and this life and so forth. Um, and I always took that as a warning. Here I am, a young, naive kid in middle school and then in high school, thinking, okay, when I graduate from college, I'm going to become a television series creator. I'm going to become famous. People are going to know me. They're going to adore me, and so forth. And I'm going to be successful. I'm going to have a car. I'm going to have a family, a wife, and so forth. That's what I envisioned. And here Al Bundy is saying he's like 41, and then goes on 42, and then the series continues on season after season. He questions, why am I, you know, what happened to me? And I always saw that as a warning, like in a humorous way, but like a warning. Um, be careful, don't get yourself stuck in a rut like that. But now it hits home because I have been in some sense, whether it's you know, from things I've done or just the situation in general. I prefer to think of things as situations that you're stuck in. Um, I'm stuck in this situation. I don't know if I'll ever get married. I'm probably too late to get married. I don't know if anybody would be interested in me. Um, I'm living alone in a one-bedroom apartment. I have a car. I'm working 2 part-time jobs. Even though I'm smart, I'm college educated. I have 2 bachelor's degrees. Both my parents were Mensa members. My uncle was a Mensa member. I've associated amongst smart people, and yet I work 2 part-time jobs, and that's one of those big concerns I'd like to talk about in a future video. I've talked about it certainly in earlier videos. So I'm stuck in that. So now it hits home on a different level. So anyway, I'm getting to this point. There's an episode in Married with Children where they find this library book that he took out in 1950, whatever, and it's now like 20 or 25 years overdue. And so he decides to go back. There's a question, should he just keep it, not return it? And he really hated the librarian, principally because, I mean, for all sorts of reasons. And they make her, she's fat and she's ugly and so forth. But he says that she never saw that he would grow up to be somebody. And so, so he decides finally to return the book. He goes in to the library, he confronts her. This is Mrs. DeGroot. And she says, could it be that I was right when I predicted that you'd be a failure in life? Could it? And then he says, it's another one of those quick, funny lines. he says right back, "Could it be that the nails that hold your chair together are from the planet Krypton?" And that's an example of what I was saying before. It's a quick line. It's a quick, funny line, but it's not just a slapdash line. It says something about his perception of her. She's fat, first of all, and she's fat. So it's him saying not just that she's fat, but it's like he's repeating what she had just lobbed at him. He's able to lob it right back, and he's demonstrating, you're not, sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me. You can lob all these insults at me, but they don't mean a thing. I can lob them right back at you. So she says, could it be that I was right when I predicted that you'd be a failure in life? And then he says back, in this nice small soliloquy, that he may never have the dream girl he always wanted. He may never have the dream life. In so many words, he may never have the dream life he always wanted. But he and everybody like him gets up in the morning. They go to a job that they don't really care for, day after day after day, and he puts it in more graphic terms, but I'll sanitize it. The fact that he hasn't, done away with himself, makes him a winner, because he still puts up with it. He and everyone else who is going out there through a life that that's not their ideal. They may be idealistic, but they put up with this garbage in their life over and over. It's not just putting up with it once. It's day after day after day. It's like Rocky. They put up with it day after day after day, and the fact that they keep going and keep going and keep going, in some sense, makes them a winner. Makes them winners. So he has this. He smiles at the end of saying that, and then it's interesting. She says back, "Well, you see, you're wrong. You could have made something of your life, but you never followed through on your promises." Meaning, she remembers back to when he was a kid, and she remembers him, of course. He said, at one point he talks to a friend. He in that flashback, he talks to his friend, and he says, "One of these days, I'm going to pour a whole, sugar, pour all the sugar down her gas tank." Okay, so modern day, she says, "You never followed through on your promises." And we could read into that. He had these promises that I'm going to do this in life, and I'm going to become this in life, and so forth. And so in the end of the episode, he says, "Oh, I'm going to follow through on a promise." And then, of course, there's the implication he's going to pour the sugar down her gas tank. Because actually, there was a thing where she would keep heaping more sugar and more lumps of sugar into her coffee for some bizarre reason. She just became addicted to sugar. So I hope you can see there is a philosophical bent to that show. There is depth to that show, and I think that's what separates it from the others that like copycatted it or thought that they could do it with gross out humor and so forth. It's not just gross out humor. It's observational humor that's delivered in a gross out manner. So anyway, so even with that show, in terms of inspiration, I was in architecture class. This would have been in high school. This would have been like maybe junior year of high school. I tended to sketch out floor maps of the sets in TV shows. So I sketched out. I'm really proud of myself. I think I even turned this in. I'm sure I turned this in for a grade on a in school. I did the um, no, actually strike that. It was similar. In school, I did a floor map of my own design for a house. But I think at about that same time at home, I sketched out the floor map of the set of the house. Not the house the way it would look in real life, but I mean the actual set. Camera angles and getting the angle of the wall just right, and there's the garage, and there's the backyard, and even going into the backyard. I even colored it in. Um, there's the lawnmower that's typically over here. So in some sense, it's like set design. It could be like preparation for being a set designer or being someone who's in charge of props on the set. And yet, it's a little glimpse into what I could have become. Going back to what I was saying before with Al Bundy, what I wish I had become later in life after college. Um, so then, so I was inspired to learn about little things about life that they referenced in the show, like salary. What would Al's tax records? He would make some offhand comment about tax form in an episode, and I was intrigued. I mean, not being a taxpayer yet, I was intrigued. What does a tax form look like? How much money would you need? All the logistics of basic family life. I would do research, just like I would do research into Star Trek and to some degree other shows that I followed on a regular basis. In my mind, I would keep a mental, it's like a gray, not a gray box, a black box, a library. I would keep an archive, a mental archive of different character biographies and so forth. And this is before the internet where you can look up anything at the spur of the moment. I was proud of myself for keeping track of character biographies and where the show was set and what city and phone numbers and stuff like that. And it really comes in handy with Star Trek. Let me go back to Star Trek for a moment. For those people who are afraid that it'll be daunting, that they won't understand Star Trek, again, I'll mention it's simply a show about a starship sent from Earth. They're like NASA astronauts. They're like explorers in the early days of seagoing exploration. You have heroic, Captain Cook and so forth. You have heroic characters. They encounter these weird situations, and the show explores humanity and how humanity deals with these science fiction concepts. And even the term science fiction concept may scare people away. It explores how humanity deals with situations that are different from our perceptions. Like basically the ultimate what if. What if you could download your memory into an android? What if you could age rapidly? What if you could become younger and live a second life? What if? How would humanity deal with this? And explores that. Just it's a starship with a crew of likable characters. They're friendly. There's a definite camaraderie, and they deal and they explore and they deal with these concepts week to week, episode to episode, as they explore planets and so forth. So to make it more real, I mean, Star Trek fans are mocked and teased for knowing minutia about the show. But of course, with any TV show, if you're a fan of it, like Lord of the Rings and so forth, this one person in particular I've mentioned before, well, Punky Brewster, that's not her real name, but I remember talking with her on the phone, and she said that she was curious about it. She was open-minded to it. Sometime I thought about making a video, like an open letter video of things I wanted to say, but hadn't had the chance to tell her. I was looking forward actually to sharing Star Trek with her, but it abruptly ended. I mean, she said she doesn't have time for a friendship like that. So anyway, I hope she's listening. But she said I discovered something intriguing about her that well I've already said Lord of the Rings. She's interested in Lord of the Rings, and so that endeared that that's some new aspect. Just like watching a TV show. um, it's like watching a TV show, and in a particular episode, you've seen the character. I mean, not talking about the actor. I mean the character, and in a little moment, or maybe this episode is about this certain aspect of the background of this character. You learn something new about the character, and you smile, and you understand the character better. So like with Punky Brewster, when she told me that, and she told me a few other things, she seemed more than just a popular girl in high school. I mean, she seemed endeared me. I mean, like, first of all, I haven't gotten into Lord of the Rings. I understand a lot of people enjoy it, and much like Star Trek, they really, you can't just dip your toe into something like that. You dip your toe, and then it feels nice, and you get your foot in there, and so forth. And pretty soon you're swimming and you're frolicking and so forth. That's one of the best analogies. Like Lord of the Rings, they may dip their toe in, and they quickly, by it, very soon they're swimming around. They may even be writing their own stories, their own Lord of the Rings inspired stories. Same thing with Star Trek. You can't just dip your foot in. I mean, I imagine some people, I've heard some people, I've talked with them. I mentioned I'm a Star Trek fan, and they say, oh, well, I watched the show back when it was on, the original series. It's amazing how many people I come across who say that they watched the show when it was originally on. Like, you'd think it would be like the whole country was watching Star Trek when, back at that time. But anyway, I know it was in reruns for a long time. Anyway, aside from those people, there are a lot of people who dip their toes in, and then they go full board. And that really helps them watching the show. In order to make the universe seem more real, when you're watching the show, in order to have it seem more real, because that's the complaint that people who don't watch the show, who are afraid of watching the show, criticize it for. That it's not real, it's fictional, it's make believe, and it bears no connection to reality. Well, by understanding how Starfleet operates, what the role of the captain on the starship is, understanding the doctor, and so forth, that makes it more real. You can wrap your mind around what's going on. As you watch a show, you understand who the Klingons are. Not that they appear in every episode, but I mean, over time, they do make appearances. You can understand the Romulans. You can understand, like, the politics of the universe at that time. You can understand, you can then extrapolate, you can make correlations between that universe and our universe, where we have different nations. We have a United Nations that's trying to keep the peace. We have an army. We have a space program, and so forth. We have so forth and so on. We have foreign language problems, and so forth. And Star Trek can become very political in the sense that it can sometimes comment very much on the politics of the day. Like, for example, Glasnost kicked in, and Star Trek Six: The Undiscovered Country came out. It was the sixth film, obviously. It came out in 1991. That was the situation between us and the Russians was very unique. And so in the movie, at the very beginning, one of their moons, Praxis, explodes, and that was a commentary on Chernobyl. And then that forces them to have to try and come to some peaceful negotiation and some understanding with the Federation. And that's like the Soviets and the United States. And then, of course, it's a thriller, so there's, I don't want to give, I don't think I'm giving that much away. It becomes action-oriented. There's an assassination, and then that kicks off the rest of the plot. But anyway, what I'm saying is, it's action adventure that anybody could follow. It's a normal plot line. People who are used to thrillers on submarines can understand and follow something in outer space. It's the same genre, and it's commenting sometimes on political situations. Even in the original series, in the second season, there was an episode commenting on the Vietnam War going on at the time, and even Kirk mentions, do you remember the brush fires in the Asian continent way back? And then McCoy says, yes, I remember, it went on bloody year after bloody year. And McCoy, the two were in a heated argument. McCoy was arguing that Kirk should not arm the other, one of the sides, just because the Klingons were arming the other side. There were two factions. The Klingons were arming one side, and so Kirk was arguing we'd better give just enough to this side to keep it equal to the side, to the level of weaponry that the Klingons were giving this side. And McCoy says, yes, I remember those brush fires. It went on bloody year after. And keep in mind, this is 1968, 68. It went on bloody year after bloody year. And Kirk says, well, the only solution then was what we need to do now to keep it at an even level, because otherwise one side would take over the other side and dominate. It was a balance of terror, which, by the way, is a totally different episode, but it's an interesting episode from the first season. It's in some sense like a balance of terror, balance of power. So I hope you see it does comment on politics. It comments on psychology. It comments on what if science fiction concepts. What if you could live for thousands of years? What if you could this? What if that? So forth and so on. So anyway, you have Transformers, Star Trek, Married with Children, then X-Files. I wondered whether I should really put X-Files on this list, but because I want to say it did make an impact on me, I'm just wondering what impact it made. The sense of suspense was already in there from Star Trek. It was well crafted. Each episode was like a 40-something minute movie in terms of budget, production, what you see on the screen, production value. It was like a small movie. And all right, certainly one aspect that impacted me was what you could do with television, and it awed me. Yeah, okay, here we go. It awed me. At that point, I had been writing spec scripts for Star Trek: The Next Generation. A spec script is short for speculative script. It means that you're writing it by yourself with no contract written with a production studio. In other words, you're volunteering. Basically, you're going in, you're volunteering this script. This is a script that I wrote. Would you buy it? And I think just about now, it, Star Trek was rare in that they did accept spec scripts. Even into the Next Generation in the late 80s and early 90s, somebody said that they were one of the production people in a documentary about Star Trek said that they were one of the shows that can even, still continue to accept, and some of their best episodes for the Next Generation were spec scripts that fans would just write and they would submit, and without a contract. There's no assignment. Okay, in television production, you have a team of writers hired for the show, and week after week, they would all collaborate, and they would one person may get writer credit on the show, on that particular episode, but it's a team working in an office, like as you'd see in the Dick Van Dyke Show sitcom. One of the best television sitcoms that's ever existed, the Dick Van Dyke Show. Please watch. Humor is great, and it's realistic, and I think it was groundbreaking in terms of showing real life. The creator of it, Carl Reiner, his son Rob Reiner, played Mike Meathead in All in the Family, and he went on to become a film producer. Okay, going back to how a television show works. So you have this team, and there are, I think, more stipulations now, or it's more commonplace now, that they don't even want to know about any fan writing an episode, just volunteering an episode script. But Star Trek, at least at that time, now I don't know now Star Trek is probably totally different, but even into Enterprise, I don't know what they were doing, but the original Star Trek series and Star Trek The Next Generation, they were still accepting volunteer scripts from fans. And David Gerrold has been a very active, almost practically from the beginning, he was an active voice for somebody in that position who was a Star Trek fan. He watched the very first show and continued watching that first season, and he got... there was an extra. He worked on iMud, I believe. He has a comedic sense of. He writes in a comedic sense. His scripts tend to be comedic. And not to say that he can write dark and real gritty conflict, but I've noticed a number of them tend to be comedic premises. Anyway, he's written a book about the making of his episode, The Trouble with Tribbles. He's written another book called The World of Star Trek, and in fact, he wrote the pilot, the 2-hour pilot. He collaborated on the 2-hour pilot for the Star Trek: The Next Generation. I was going somewhere with this. He's one of those examples of somebody from outside the tight-knit staff of writers coming in and eventually reaching the point of being able to be hired to write the pilot episode for The Next Generation. I had written a couple of few spec scripts for Married with Children. This is in high school, and at least one or two for Star Trek: The Next Generation. That was my naivete, thinking if I write one that's really good, maybe I'll get hired or get noticed, or somebody will talk to me from the studio. And plus, I wanted to live in that fantasy. I wanted to live in that world. I don't mean Star Trek. I don't mean the 23rd century. I mean, I read about these writers. That's the thing. I learned a lot about television production from my interest in Star Trek, reading about Star Trek, reading books about Star Trek. Um, I suspect that Star Trek is unique in being one of the few shows where the fans know just as much about the behind the scenes making of the show as the show itself. Um, I'm going out on a limb. I'll hazard a guess that that's rare for a show to have fans that are that dedicated that they follow what's going on. I don't mean like a kook or whatever, so a few kooks or something in the world. I mean the majority of fans, Star Trek fans, know the background elements of the show just as much as the show itself, the universe of the fictional universe of the show itself. So anyway, going back to the X-Files, um, it impressed upon me that the importance of suspense, that you can be able to make a suspenseful show um, almost like a 40-something minute movie um, with a higher production value. Um, I know it's not as, that impact isn't as much as the earlier stuff that I've mentioned about these other shows, but I think X-Files, I liked X-Files and I followed it faithfully. I figured it deserves to be mentioned in there. And also I enjoyed the paranormal and so forth. So it's kind of intriguing because before X-Files premiered, I was faithfully watching another show called Sightings back in 1991, something like that. Yeah, something like 1990 something. There was a special called the UFO Report, Sightings. And I thought it was just I think it was I can't remember how long. It was something like 1 hour, or maybe 90 minutes or something. It was just a special that aired on Fox, just like other documentaries. Like I was familiar with the ones from the 70s. They're like vintage and that. You know how sometimes movies can be so oddly produced that they're kind of entertaining for weird reasons. Like so bad they're good. There's some vintage 1970s documentaries about UFOs and the paranormal that are so cookie cutter in the sense of their delivery and like the narrator or the host. And of course the vintage, the faded film stock that you see it on, which I guess may not have been faded at the time. It's just faded, when they transferred it. In the midst of transferring it, I guess they transferred from a faded copy or some faded print of it. But it's that 70s aesthetic. I had seen several of those, so I thought Sightings, the UFO Report, was simply one of those specials, and then they aired another one called Ghosts, devoted to Ghosts, a Sightings special about ghosts, and then they created a TV series which would air Friday nights, and of course, I had all these books. I had a pretty good library, and I'd read more from the. I had a pretty good library of my own of books, like adult books, and I'd read pretty good stack of books worth from various libraries on ghosts, UFOs, mainly ghosts and UFOs. So. But I enjoyed this, so I was already tuned for a series like this. So that I think they went through 2 seasons, and then the third season or something they switched. But I remember the X-Files being announced that its premiere in fall of '93, and I thought, why are they putting this show on the air and they're going to take away Sightings? It seems so ironic because, in retrospect, I would take X-Files over Sightings any day. In retrospect, it's weird that I was dismayed at X-Files. And then when I began watching X-Files and delving into it further, something like Star Trek in the sense that they would reveal, just like a long-form suspense movie, they would reveal little hints and clues in this episode and then in this episode. And if you're following faithful, it kind of, I haven't seen the show Twin Peaks, but maybe it's something akin to that. Like, if you're following the show over the course of time, if you catch these things, it'll start. You'll start understanding what's going on. It's like a mystery. It's like a long form mystery movie. You'll pick up clues, and your mind will start going towards what's going to happen. You know, trying to piece it all together because there are several mysteries going on. And then, of course, around the fifth season, when the movie came out, X-Files: Fight the Future. Nice title. It was about that time when the clues started contradicting themselves, and I mean the newer clues contradicted the older clues, and I thought, no, they're just darn. They had a really good idea, and now it seems like they're just. It seems sort of. I think maybe they were writing towards the movie coming out. I mean, maybe they had something, maybe like Babylon 5. Maybe they had like a seasonal arc, like multi-seasonal arc, and they just had to keep going past the point they expected to, and maybe that's when if it did fall apart, if it was falling apart, maybe that's why. But it just seemed to, there didn't seem to be a point to it anymore. Because one of the thrills of it was figuring out what's going on, trying to piece these clues together. And as I said in one of my recent videos here, one of the talents I have, I take pride in is being able to see the whole picture and correlating and seeing how all these aspects fit together. That goes into why I like these shows, particularly Transformers, Star Trek, well, Married with Children somewhat, but Transformers, Star Trek, and X-Files, they all have a common aspect in that you have very unique ideas that intermesh and twist together, so forth. And I mean intermesh and correlate in interesting ways. I suppose I'll get to what I would have done as a filmmaker. I was watching Spielberg, and I had written a letter to him. It was returned with a letter saying basically, so many words, thank you. He doesn't have time to read any material from outside. I understand that, but it was worth a try anyway. I want to, perhaps in my next video, I want to talk about what my films would have been like, what my personal style would have been. That's what I put in the letter. I identified what my style, certain aspects of my style that I would want to recognize and to intentionally put into my films. Maybe I'll mention what film ideas I have. I don't know if they'll ever, ever become films or story ideas or what. I have questions about whether I should mention my story ideas or not, if I'm just giving stuff away. But on the other hand, I kind of feel like my time has passed. I don't know if it'll ever come to be, and maybe I should share them rather than just die and let them die with me. But I also wrote down here some common themes, and I'll have a chance before to get that letter out. It's right here on my computer, actually, right in here in this computer on the other side of the screen, and go through them again and write them down. So it'll be a comprehensive list of themes I'd explore, common themes I'd explore, and common moods and commonness and tropes that I would think I would be known for. I would want to be known for as a filmmaker. Just like I think I have some common things with Spielberg, and watching that documentary called Spielberg, again from HBO, Um, he noticed that. I mean, I'm sorry. He could tell I've been talking. It's been an hour and 25 minutes. Um, I'm a little out of breath. He mentioned at one point lack of self-esteem. I don't remember how he phrased it, but when he was a child, and I didn't have a sense of lack of self-esteem. Um, Maybe in certain aspects I did. That's something I'd like to cover in other videos in this channel. Um, but in other aspects, I find some shared traits. Number one, interest in our Jewish heritage. Smart, being the outcast. Having this neighborhood, peaceful, suburban environment that I'm familiar with, that I'm used to, and that being happiness and bliss, just like Leave It to Beaver kind of neighborhood. Um, and also having an interest in, of course, movies he's dealt with, aliens in various forms, and science fiction concepts, and the magical and fantastic, and so forth. Um, and also, we were Boy Scouts. I think he was an Eagle Scout too. So was I. Um, and of course, he mentioned his the effect that the divorce had on him. I don't know how old he was when his parents divorced, but I grew up with just my mom, and my dad visited. I think I counted, it was only about 5 times in my life. He did call me. We did talk on the phone. He would send me boxes of books and letters and so forth that I saved. I should still have all those letters. I found quite a few of them, so forth, thankfully. I mean, my mom was really careful about saving and preserving all this stuff. I mean, some people say that I had a lot of stuff. They question, why do you keep all this stuff? Well, it's my whole life. I mean, it's my mom's stuff. It's letters from my dad that can't be replaced. They're locked boxes of private papers and so forth. I mean, you're going to accumulate quite a bit. So it is quite a bit. So I'll leave that for next time. Thanks. Bye.